Hello and welcome to another episode of The Data Point. The language debate is back in the spotlight again. Tamil Nadu is resisting the implementation of the new education policy, calling it an indirect way to impose Hindi. The centre has refuted these allegations, but they are withholding the funds meant for the implementation of the Samagra Shiksha Abhiyan in Tamil Nadu. But in this video, we are not going to discuss about the pros and cons of the new education policy, nor are we going to discuss about the impact of the withholding of the funds. We are going to look at some of the core issues which is reigniting this language debate again and again in some form or the other. For this, we will be asking three broader questions and answering them through data. Is Tamil Nadu or the non-Hindi belt states in general unwilling to learn and speak new languages? Question 2. Why is resistance to Hindi stronger in the south compared to other non-Hindi speaking states such as Gujarat and Maharashtra? And question number 3. What should be the linked language? Should it be English or Hindi? Or in other words, should the native Hindi speakers be encouraged to speak English, or should the non-Hindi speakers be encouraged to speak Hindi? So let's dive into the first question. Is Tamil Nadu or the non-Hindi states in general unwilling to learn and speak new languages? To understand this, we are going to divide the states into three groups. The first group is the Hindi belt states: Bihar, Rajasthan, Madhya Pradesh, Himachal Pradesh, Haryana and Uttar Pradesh. The second group are the non-Hindi belt states which are not in the south: West Bengal, Punjab, Gujarat, Maharashtra and Odisha. And the third group are the non-Hindi states which are in the south, which is Tamil Nadu, Kerala, Karnataka and Andhra Pradesh. And here we are considering Andhra Pradesh as one unit, as the last census was conducted in 2011 and at that time it was not bifurcated into Andhra Pradesh and Telangana. Now to understand this better, let's dive into the data. Now first, we are going to look at the share of monolinguals, or the share of people who can speak only one language. To start with, let's go for the Hindi belt and let's choose Bihar. Now, the share of native Hindi speakers in Bihar who can speak only one language, which is Hindi, was 90% in 1991, which increased to 95% in 2001 and stayed put at that level in 2011 as well. Now, if we can roll over to other states, which is Uttar Pradesh, it was 92% to 89% to 91%. If we keep moving towards to all the northern states, we can see that the level of native Hindi speakers who can speak only one language has remained very high and even increased further by about a percentage point or two. So similarly, if we look at all the states, as you can see, the share of native Hindi speakers have remained as high as 90 and went as high as 95%, and it remained above that 90% mark for all the states except the case of Haryana. Right. Now let us see the same for the non-Hindi, non-South states. Now let's take the case of Gujarat. As you can see, the share of native Gujaratis in Gujarat who can speak only one language reduced from 78% to 67% to 60% in the 1991, 2001, 2011 census. And if you go and do the same for Maharashtra, you can see a similar decline from 74.8% to 60% to 54%. Similarly, the share of native Odia speakers in Odisha who can speak only one language reduced from 85 to 57 to 74.5. Now let us look at the case of West Bengal. In West Bengal alone, the share of native Bengali speakers who can speak only one language reduced from 90% to 83% in 2001 but increased back to 89.5 in 2011. But in general, if you see all the states which are non-Hindi states which are not in the south, you see a general reducing trend of the share of monolinguals except in the case of West Bengal. Now let us look at the same figures for the non-Hindi states which are in the south. Let's take the case of Tamil Nadu. In Tamil Nadu, the share of native Tamil speakers who speak only one language reduced from 84.5% in 1991 to 82.2% in 2001 to 77.9% in 2011. Now let's look at the case of Kerala. In Kerala, the share of monolinguals to start with was already very low, and it has almost maintained the similar level across all the censuses. If you look at Andhra Pradesh, you can see a similar decline from 87 to 81 to 82. If you look at Karnataka, the share of native Kannada speakers who can speak only one language reduced from about 80% to 70% and followed a similar trajectory. So if you look at all the non-Hindi states in the south, you can see a similar trend of the share of monolinguals reducing over time. So from the graphs that we have seen till now, a clear pattern emerges, which is the non-Hindi speakers are generally more open to learning new languages, whereas the native Hindi speakers show a lower tendency to learn and speak new languages. Now let's go to the second question. Why is resistance to Hindi stronger in the south compared to other non-Hindi speaking states such as Gujarat and Maharashtra? To understand this better, let us look at the share of English speakers across all the states. Let's start with English and let's now choose non-Hindi states in the south, and let's start with Tamil Nadu. What you are looking at is the share of native Tamil speakers who can also speak English. The share increased from 13.5% in 1991 to 15.1% in 2001 to 18.5% in 2011. If you see the case of Andhra Pradesh, you will still see a rise from 11% to 14% to 13%. In Kerala, the share of native Malayalam speakers who can also speak English was already very high at 23.5% in 1991, and it reduced a bit from 22.4 to 20.3%. You can see a similar increase across all the south states, except in the case of Kerala where there was a bit of decline from a very high base. In general, if you see across all the southern states, the share of native speakers who can also speak English is above 10% across all these years. Now let us move on to the non-Hindi states which are not in the south. Let's take the case of Gujarat. As you can see, the native Gujarati speakers in Gujarat who can also speak English increased from 9.6% to 11.7% to 12.8%. And in the case of Maharashtra, you can see it has increased from 12.1% to 14.3 to 14, and it stayed at around that level in 2011 as well. In the case of Odisha, it increased from 13.1 to 19.6 to 19.2. In the case of Punjab, it increased a lot from 22% to 32 to 31. So in general, you see across all the non-Hindi states which are not in the south, the share of English is increasing as well. Now let us also look at the share of English speakers in the Hindi belt states. So let us choose Hindi belt and let us look at Bihar. So the share of native Hindi speakers in Bihar who can also speak English reduced from 8.7% in 1991 to 3.5% and 2.4% in 2011. If you take the case of Uttar Pradesh, similarly the increase was 7.3% to 9 and back to 6.3% in 2011. In the case of Rajasthan, you can see the share of native Hindi speakers in Rajasthan who can also speak English reducing from 7 to 4% in 2011. Now in the case of Haryana, the share of native Hindi speakers who can speak English was as high as 17%, reduced to 15.9% to 14.6%. In the case of Himachal Pradesh, the share of native Hindi speakers who can also speak English reduced drastically from 21% to 7.6%. So in general, if you take all the northern states or the Hindi belt states of the native speakers who can also speak English, you see the low base across many of the states, and it is also declining, except in the case of maybe Haryana, which started at the very high base, but the decline was there and it was more gradual. Let us now go to the share of Hindi speakers across the non-Hindi southern states and non-Hindi states which are not in the south. Let us start with the non-Hindi southern states. In the case of Tamil Nadu, the share of native Tamil speakers who can also speak Hindi was as low as 0.5% in 1991 and barely increased to 0.7 and 1.4% in the 2011 census. Similarly, if you take the case of Andhra Pradesh, the native Telugu speakers who can also speak Hindi was as low as 8%, increased to 11% and reduced back to 8.7%. In the case of Kerala, it was as high as 18.4%, but it was declining to 13.8 and further declined to only 9% in 2011. And in the case of Karnataka, the share of native Kannada speakers who can also speak Hindi was as low as 8.6% to start with, went to 12%, came back to 8.5%. However, in the case of non-Hindi, non-South states, that was not the case. Now let us go to the non-Hindi states which are not in the South. Now let us take a case of Gujarat. The share of native Gujaratis who can also speak Hindi increased from as low as 21.7% in 1991, went up to 32.3% in 2001 to 38.9% in 2011. Let us take the case of Maharashtra. In the case of Maharashtra, already in 1991, 35.7% of native Marathi speakers can also speak Hindi, which increased to 38.2% and further to 43.6% in the 2011 census. So similarly, if we take Odisha, the increase is there from 10% to 14.7% to 16.7%. Similarly, in the case of Punjab, you can see a similar increase from 32.2% native Punjabis also speaking Hindi to 45.6%. So in general, in most of these non-Hindi states which are not in the South, you can see an increase in the share of native speakers who can also speak Hindi, except in the case of West Bengal, where the share of Hindi speakers have remained almost low. Now in the second set of charts which we saw just now, another pattern has emerged. The first one is, in the Hindi belt, English speaking population have remained very minimal. But more importantly, in the South, a higher share of people opted for English as their additional language, with only a marginal increase in Hindi speakers. In the western and eastern states, both English and Hindi speaking population went up in general. And this explains why resistance to Hindi is more pronounced in the southern states than in other states in the western and eastern parts of the country. Now let's move to the third question, which is that what should be the linked language in India? Should it be English or should it be Hindi? Which is more beneficial for the population? To understand this better, we have chosen the Human Development Index, which measures a state's standard of living, its health and also the education. Now let's plot the English language proficiency and the HDI on a graph. As you can see, we have plotted the share of English language speakers across state on this axis and the HDI of the states on this axis. Each circle corresponds to a state, and the bigger the circle, more the population of the state. For example, let us take the case of Uttar Pradesh, which is a state in the Hindi belt. And as you can see, the share of English language speakers is 6.4%. So it is appearing on the bottom left hand side of the axis. And the HDI is also low at around 0.609. So it is on the left bottom. Now let us choose a state which is the non-Hindi belt and in the south, which is Kerala. The share of English language speakers is as high as 20.1%, and also the HDI is high, which is 0.758. So you see that the state of Kerala is towards the top right hand corner of the graph. So as you can see, in general, as the share of English speaking population in the state increases, the HDI of the state is also increasing, and there is a moderate positive correlation between these two variables. Now let us look at it region by region. Let us take only the case of the Hindi belt states. Now as you can see, most of these states are in the lower bottom corner of this graph, which shows that the share of English speakers is less and the HDI is also less. Let us take the case of non-Hindi South, and as you can see, the share of English speakers is increasing and the HDI is also increasing. And in the case of non-Hindi non-South too, a similar trend emerges where the states which generally have a higher English speaking population also have a higher HDI, and the states which have a lower English speaking population has a lower HDI. Now let's look at the same graph again from a different lens. We plotted the share of Hindi speaking population across states and compared it with HDI. Now as you can see, there is no big correlation between these two variables, unlike what you saw on the previous graph when we plotted the English speaking population against the HDI. So the graph suggests a positive correlation between higher standard of living and English proficiency. So this brings back to the third question. Should English be the link language or Hindi? Migration data also suggests that more and more people from Hindi belt are moving to the non-Hindi speaking states in search of better economic opportunities. So, does Hindi as a link language make sense at all? Thank you for watching the video. For more such videos, subscribe to the Hindu.
Electors than the city's exteriors. Now let us see how the numbers have changed.